Welcome to ABC Chat. My name's Rich Taunt. I'm part of the team here at Kaleidoscope Health and Care. ABC Chat may be new to you. If it is, a very warm welcome. If you're wondering what on earth it is, ABC stands for Apart But Connected. We're living in some pretty funny times at the moment when the need for us to connect, to share, to come together has never been greater, even if some of the logistical challenges are somewhat harder. So thanks very much for joining us for the first time. A very warm welcome back if you've joined us in previous episodes. So ABC Chat is half an hour. It's all about taking a little bit of time to come together in this somewhat altered world. And if you have joined us before, you'll know that each week we're joined by a special guest, and delighted to be joined this week by Will Warburton of the Health Foundation. Good morning, Will.
Good morning, Rich. Very good to be here.
Thanks so much for stepping into our virtual studio, I suppose we can call it that. Will, how is lockdown treating you?
We are just about managing. It's probably a fair characterization.
Okay, your head is above water. Well, look, I think the first test is, does your backdrop look at least mildly tidy? And I think you can get marks for that, but there's not utter chaos in your household, Will.
Those who know me well or have worked with me know that I keep a very, very clean desk, and that's now had to be brought into the house as well, which is one of the reasons why we're just managing.
Okay, well, so a global pandemic doesn't alter your clear desk policy. Is there a stage, Will, where actually you might leave like a stapler out? You know, what global pandemic plus what equals a mildly untidy desk?
So the more mischievous members of my team have been known to run into my office when I'm not there and try and leave items on there, just to see my reaction when I come back.
There we go. So ABC Chat is all about learning. What we've learned this morning is if you ever want to really needle Will Warburton, go and just leave a Twix wrapper on his desk and wait for the carnage to unfold. Will, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll be hearing more from you as we go through. This is a show in two halves. We are streaming live on YouTube. You may be watching back on YouTube at a later point. But we'd very much like you to get involved on Twitter, please. That hashtag is ABC Chat. ABC Chat is the hashtag. We'll be throwing you a number of questions as we go through. Please do respond to those. But also, we'd really like you to take this opportunity to make fresh connections, possibly to reach out, connect with people you wouldn't have otherwise done so. A range of ways you can do that. You know, like other people's tweets, retweet other people's tweets, reply to them, even send them direct messages. Please do use it as a way to sort of connect with others who may be thinking in a similar way. So please do join us on Twitter, ABC Chat. If you are joining us after the event, use the YouTube comments feature. You can pop a comment underneath. That might be about what particularly resonated with you from today. It might be trying to decipher the books behind Will on his bookcase and their exact symbolic value. Either of those is absolutely fine. So please do get involved in a range of different ways. It is lovely to have you with us this morning. So our first question for you, as always, it's quite a teaser. Very simply, who are you? And where are you joining us from today? That could be you're welcome to say that your organisation, your profession, who you're representing, or equally, it might just be the particular room you're in within your house. As always on ABC Chat, you get bonus points if you want to accompany your introductory tweet with a selfie, brandishing some sort of ridiculous drinking receptacle. Will, firstly, what room in your house are you in, and do you have some sort of ridiculous receptacle close at hand?
So I'm joining you from the living room, and I have this commemorative mug from a trip we made to Yosemite National Park some 15 years ago, which must have cost all of a couple of dollars and has remained absolutely intact since. My favorite bit of it is, I probably can't show this, but it's got a little bear print in the inside just there, which makes you think, has a bear been in my cup?
Well, thank you very much indeed. So you mean you've gone through however many rounds of kitchen tidying in that time, and that survived?
it has sufficient sentimental value to have stayed with us.
Excellent, lovely, Mark. Thank you very much, Will. I'm going today for hedgehogs. Slightly ridiculous, but particularly in homage to, if you were watching a couple of episodes ago, Harry Rutter was joining us and talking about his hedgehog which he had outside his garden. Harry, if you're joining us, we'd love a little update on whether indeed you did decide to call your hedgehog Colin for reasons which still slightly don't quite come to me. So thank you for all those introducing themselves on Twitter. Please continue to do so. Again, bonus points if you have some sort of ridiculous mug. We haven't worked out a distribution mechanism for ABC chat bonus points. All suggestions very much welcome. We'll move on. Our first section is all about learning. We are living in times which are changing pretty rapidly. And we think it's really important just to find a bit of time just to carve out what we've learned, how we've adapted to these changing times. And in particular, so what do we know now, which we didn't know last week? What's changed for us in that way? Will, what do you know now, which you don't know last week?
I'm doing a lot of home education at the moment, and I think the thing that's really reminded me of, I have 6 and 8-year-old girls, Millie and Kitty, and it's reminded me just of how much you take for granted in terms of what we know, and yet how hard it can be to explain it to others, which I should know about from improvement research as well, that knowing and using something every day isn't the same as being able to explain it clearly to others, which I really stumbled across when trying to explain to my daughter yesterday what a pronoun was.
Thank you, Will. Just for the benefit of all those tuning in, would you like to explain what a pronoun is?
I think probably most people would intuitively know what a pronoun is. Describing it is a lot harder. I resorted to Google and found something about it's replacing other nouns, but the second thing I found was something from Calvin and Hobbes saying that it's a noun that's lost its amateur status, which is what I ended up going with.
And that's what you passed on to your 6 and 8-year-old girls?
Yes, it is troubling for their long-term futures. We need to return to school quickly. Excellent.
That school reopening cannot come fast enough for the sake of many. Well, thank you very much indeed. One thing I've learned this week through a whole range of conversations with people is just something about the accidental. And particularly, I've been thinking just a bit about traveling to meetings. If you're anything like me, your travel time to meetings at the moment is the amount of time it takes you to go click on Microsoft Teams or Zoom or whatever your video platform of choice is, which actually removes just that sort of bit of time, which might be half an hour, might be 2 minutes, of actually just traveling to a meeting and that sort of sense of preparing yourself for what you're going in for. We do a lot of stuff about sort of meetings at Kaleidoscope. And so one of the things we're thinking about is just how you can, in a digital world, still build in that bit of time for sort of reflection, just sort of getting yourself together, which is a bit harder when you're just surfing endless digital meetings. Again, if people have got particular reflections on that, we would love to hear them. So please do share what you have learned this week on Twitter. Once again, ABC Chat is the hashtag. Thanks, Will. Thanks to those who are already sharing. We will move on. In our next segment, we've entitled Jack and Ori, which for some of us, people go, yeah, of course. Probably people of mine and Will's age, perhaps. But possibly if you're a bit younger, you may be going, what on earth is Jack and Ori? It was a storytelling show. I think it might have even come back. Storytelling show where, in a different sort of program, this part of our broadcast might be termed the presentation slot or even the keynote. It's not that sort of show. What we're interested in is a story with relevance to COVID, but not directly about it. Will, thanks for joining us to tell your story this morning. What story are you going to tell us?
So perhaps not an original story. Some may have heard of it before, but I think it's a hopeful one. I was asked to do a positive story as one as well, not directly related to COVID. And it's one that I think has a kind of appropriateness as we prepare to commemorate the 75th anniversary of VE Day tomorrow as well. And I think it's hopeful because I think it suggests that through all the heartache and anxiety, and those of you who tuned in last week would have seen Charlotte August speak very beautifully about the sadness that people are experiencing right now. But through all of that, I think we will see some remarkable, and are seeing some remarkable changes to medicine, to healthcare, and to how it's delivered. In order to get to that positive point, I need to go back first, though, to an even darker time, which is if we're thinking now that perhaps 250,000 people around the world may have died of COVID-19, which is an incredible toll, it still is dwarfed by the incredible figures of maybe 70 million people who died in the Second World War, directly or indirectly. But remarkably, since then, in the 75 years since then, maybe more lives have been saved thanks to some of the innovations and some of the things that came about as a result of the war, or that were accelerated as a result of the war. And the most obvious of those is development of penicillin. And many of you will know that the story of Alexander Fleming, a man who did clearly not have a clear desk policy, because when he went on holiday, he had not tidied up before he left. And on return, he found bacteria growing everywhere in his petri dish, but none growing around the mold. And of course, that's the word people think of as the discovery of penicillin. But it was another near 15 years before the first patients began to be treated, including a lot of development work by scientists, not Fleming himself, in terms of drug development and testing. But it was really an astonishing acceleration that followed over the next 2 or 3 years, which was driven by the necessity of the situation of the war, where you get to a point of around 400 million units being produced in 1943 and billions of units a couple of years later. And it's hard to find estimates of how many lives penicillin is estimated to have saved since, but what I can find, estimates range anywhere between 80 to 200 million people. So what to take from this? Well, one has to be careful here. This isn't an argument for creating horrific situations in order to find benefit. It's certainly not an argument for war. It's not a celebration of tragedy. It's no doubt that the possibility of future benefits that arise from the situation we're in now will be scant consolation to those suffering present grief. But for me, it does make me reflect on how, when we go through very significant shifts in the outside world, I don't think anyone can argue that we're not doing that now, then things that we've had before take on new value. We see them in a different way to how we saw them previously. And that can be in the personal front, it can be appreciation for and valuing our health, our family. It can be the opportunity to teach your daughter about pronouns. But on a service innovation level, I think we're seeing that very significantly right now too. The foundation, Health Foundation, many of you will know, we fund a lot of work in the service. And we started funding online consultations via Skype in Newham in 2010, a full decade ago. And an amazing team there, great partnership with evaluators in Oxford. They've been working on scaling these for that full decade. In 9 years and 9 months, we're still in 1 or 2% of consultations in a small number of specialties taking place that way. And we're now seeing that absolutely turned on its head in 9 weeks. So there are many other examples we could go into, but I think my overall kind of message is that great shifts create unpredictable consequences, and we need to be really alert to and notice the possibilities in the hope that we and our descendants be benefiting from things that we are now going to see in a new light 75 further years from today.
Well, thank you very much indeed. One of the limitations of this format is that applause has come in a slightly strange way, but I think we'll all just give Will a round of applause. Thank you very much indeed. Thought-provoking as ever, and lots for us to discuss. This is your chance at home to get involved. That what we'd like you to do, please, is to think about questions for Will. So following on from Will's story, but particularly to use the advantages of this format. So what's the one question, you can have more, but what's the one question you'd most like to ask from the safety of your laptop, which you may not ask from if you were there in person? That question, for example, could be, hang on, Will, you were asked to tell a positive story and you talked about a war. That could be a question you would ask from the safety of your laptop, but not possibly if you're there in person. So please do send those questions through. ABC chat once more is the hashtag. And what I'll do is, if it's okay, well, I'll steal Chair's prerogative, and I'll throw in a question first, and then we'll come to questions already coming through. Thank you very much for those. So, well, a really important story there. Is there something, so playing devil's advocate, is there something about crisis which just isn't possible to replicate in normal times? And so we go, wow, look at all this innovation now. We need to keep this going. It really needs to happen later on. Is that even feasible?
So, I think that's right. I think if you go into any management textbook or management course, someone will probably throw John Cotter's books at you first and give you 8 steps that you should do to create change. And the first one will probably be something like creating a burning platform for change. And I've always struggled with the idea that a leader's job is to go around setting fires around their team, so they just run off at speed and jump into the water. I think there are other ways of achieving change. But I'd agree it's not really possible to create this kind of shift in an organic day-to-day way. That's why this is such an important time and opportunity. If you look at, for example, we're talking about online or consultations or even virtual consultations more generally face-to-face, surveys a couple of years ago suggest that around 50 or 60% of people would be willing to conduct those in normal times. Now, we don't yet have data on how the public perception will have shifted, but during this period, hundreds and thousands of people will have, by necessity, experienced them. And before, fears that they may have had, if you think about classic adoption kind of theory, they may find benefits as well. So you were talking about the benefits and disbenefits of online in terms of losing your thinking space, but patients may well be discovering some of the benefits of convenience to them of being able to consult with a GP or with their clinician from home. Those that are ecologically minded may think about the environmental benefits that come from these sorts of innovations. So it's very difficult to create these sorts of opportunities outside of crisis times, despite some of the best efforts of some of our managerial colleagues.
So just to make clear, Will, you endorse clear desks. You do not endorse setting fire to things. It's just to be clear.
Yes, I'm a health and safety guru freak as well as a clear desk guru.
Lovely, good. Will Warburton Guide to Leadership in all good bookshops soon. Thank you for all those sending through questions. Again, please do so. ABC chat. Lovely question through from Theo. Theo, thanks very much for joining. I think picking up this theme, well, that there is this opportunity now, and something like online consultations. We talk about online consultations all the time at the moment. But how do we make sure that those things which are picked up and run with and really turn into a sort of that transformative change actually do the most good for the most people? I think one of these stories, if not the story, from the sort of the COVID very sad experience so far has been the striking inequality. Is there a risk that we end up with change which does wonders for some people, but not necessarily those who most need it?
There are very significant risks on that front. I think that one of the things that gets lost, I don't mean to be too down on managerial processes. I come from a managerial background. I'm very respectful of them. One of the things that gets lost is the careful commissioning, introduction, evaluation of interventions. when things are brought in at this pace. Now, I think this is a real challenge to the management, research, and evaluation community to say, actually, we need to develop much more agile, much faster methods of understanding the impacts on patients of things that have been brought in at pace. There will be a very large number of unintended consequences, of which inequality will, an exacerbation of existing inequalities will almost certainly be one. So then we need to give equal energy and attention to learning from that and adjusting the way that we're running things to try and ensure that equity doesn't get lost alongside many other dimensions of quality that would be at risk from introducing things at pace without those usual safeguards around them.
So there is something, so I think really well made point, and there's something there just about the care needed and sort of the very deliberate focusing of these sort of change efforts. And then it can feel a bit like, everything's up for grabs, so we should just try and do everything all at once. But I think what I'm hearing is actually advocating a slightly more nuanced approach about being really clear about what we are trying to do and not trying to do everything necessarily.
And it's easier to say than do. I have full sympathy and respect for everybody who's working in positions now where they're having to solve problems on the spot now. And you could imagine them listening to this and saying, well, that's all very easy for you to say from your living room, and it is. And that's not what I want. The message I want to give. The message I want to give is that we need to give equal energy and attention to supporting the iterative development of these innovations now. And I work, as you know, closely with wonderful Mary Dixon Woods and her colleagues at Cambridge University, who are experimenting with some wonderful methods of trying to get people to be able to contribute online through a citizen science platform they've developed to clinical scenarios, for example. So you can get obstetrical emergencies at the moment, so you can get the obstetrician, the midwife, the healthcare assistant, women managers, safety experts to look at a scenario, quickly comment on it, and then use robust methods to try and build consensus about the best way to act. I mean, that's a world away from the sort of 3-year evaluation kind of thing that we're used to around service change. And that's what I mean about needing to really rapidly experiment with different ways of learning about what's working for whom and getting these insights, noticing and adjusting to avoid the significant risks of harm that exist when you do innovate at this kind of pace.
Well, thank you very much. And let's keep with that theme about the risks here. Lovely question from Joy. Thanks very much for joining, Joy, who says that sort of amidst all of this creativity and this sort of construction, there can be disruption too. So a question about how we manage the risks of that. But just from what you've seen, Will, if you're a betting man, where would you put your money on some of the things which actually are most at risk of getting lost in this period?
So an area that obviously I'm very interested in is the development of quality improvement capability through the NHS. So the ability to sort of develop these methods of rapid testing and learning. And that would be a good example of something that has to understandably, in many cases, pause, both on practical grounds of it's hard to bring people together for training, and because you need to actually get people out to be supporting immediate delivery. So I think there's a significant risk that long-term investment in the things that actually help us to continuously improve might get paused and then hard to get going again. I don't necessarily disagree with any of the decisions that have been made around that, but eventually we've got to find our way back to not just being able to solve problems today, but having people, teams, organizations that are equipped to identify and anticipate and solve problems for themselves. So yeah, I think it's a very, very, very good point. There will be much that could be lost if we're not careful.
Well, thank you very much. We've got a little bit more time, but then we will move on. We do ask people to give us questions from the safety of their laptop. They may not ask in person. Andrew, thank you for joining, Andrew. Thank you for using that facility. It's a nice, easy question, possibly for us to finish on, Will, saying, is health policy and strategy simply a waste of a time if it takes a crisis to actually enable change?
Absolutely not. No. I don't know, Rich, you may have your own view on that. It plays an incredibly important function. It is very, very hard. The forces of inertia and conservatism with a small c within healthcare are exceptionally strong. And strategy and policy are two very important fields in helping to try and introduce change that's positive and effective into healthcare. So I wouldn't rule them out completely because we certainly can't rely on having crises every year as a way of moving our health and care services forward.
Well, thank you very much. And again, to endorse this point that we are thinking very much about how we take the opportunities from what is an incredibly difficult situation without wanting ever to see something like this happen again. Will, thank you so much for joining and telling your story. We are going to move on now, but please do continue to share reflections on Twitter, ABC chat, but also if you're watching later on, do use that comment facility under the video. There may be bits in there which you vehemently agree with or disagree with. We'd very much love to hear from you. Our final segment today is just a chance to give thanks. Lots of us finding some new ways to give thanks at the moment, and we want to extend that here as well. So, question for all of you joining: who would you most like to give a standing ovation to this week? That might be someone in your very sort of personal context. It might be within the four walls of your dwelling, or it might be an organisation which you particularly admire and want to give them a particular shout out. So please again do share ABC chat. There's an organisation which we at Kaleidoscope would like to mention in a second. But Will, who would you like to give a standing ovation to this week?
Well, I am going to take this for gratuitously personal choice here, which is I'm going to give a round of applause to my wife, who is an anaesthetist who's been working on the most incredibly intense rota for the last 8 or 9 weeks, and today is her last long day before she has her week on the rota off. And obviously I knew I was marrying an extraordinary person when I did so, but this last couple of months have shown me that even more so over again. And through that, to anyone who has put themselves at personal risk to help and care for others over this time.
Will, thank you very much. Very lovely standing ovation there. Again, please do share who you'd like to give a standing ovation to on Twitter, ABC chat. Organisation which we would like to particularly single out this week is an organisation called Robes, which is a homeless charity, small homeless charity, working in Lambeth and Southwark, not far away from us here at Kaleidoscope. Been working since 2007, helping people across those boroughs. Currently working with 29 guests in a range of different ways to help get them through this really difficult time. So doing fantastic work. Very much like to give you a standing ovation. At the end of all this, there'll be an evaluation form, exciting stuff, which we'll tweet out, and it will also be in the YouTube description, for which every completed form will donate £3 to Robes. So even if you hate filling in forms, please do take the time. Just force us to give a bit more money to Robes. We'd really appreciate that. So for Will's wife, for all those who are on chat, everyone on Twitter is highlighting all those working in such difficult situations. To Robes, we'd like to give you a standing ovation, please. Thanks very much indeed. Thank you, and please do continue sharing on Twitter. We are pretty much out of time today. A huge thanks again to Will for joining us, telling us your story today. Will, absolute pleasure for you to join us. Thank you so much. And thank you all who have joined, whether live or later on there will be a short blog talking about some of the issues on the Kaleidoscope website later on today. You may want to catch up with the blog and video from last week's episode with Charlotte Talks. We'll be back here next week, 11 o'clock on Thursday, so we very much hope you can join us then. Again, there'll be an evaluation form in a second. Every form will donate £3 to Rover, so please do find a moment to do that. But for now, we'll say thanks very much for joining ABC Chat, and we'll see you next week. Thanks so much. Goodbye.